a new leader in the open source world,
potentially creating guidelines and outlines of how to use responsible AI in military action.
I didn't wear red because I wanted to talk about strawberry again. God knows.
Whatever the controversy is, Matt Schumer yesterday apologized.
They are parting ways with Salesforce.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the Daily AI Show Live. It's Wednesday, so that means it's news day. So we're going to go through all of the latest news and highlight the ones that we think are the most important. With me today is Brian, Beth, and Andy, and I'm Jyunmi. So let's get this started with a great story that I'm sure everyone was super excited about that dropped early, I don't know, a couple hours ago maybe. Mistral, the big open source model developer, frontier model developer, dropped their new model called Pixtral 12B, right? And what's important here is the fact that it's their first multimodal model, right? Say that 5 times fast. And so that means they should be able to handle things like image beyond text, such as image and sound and all of these other aspects. The clear features that they've talked about specifically are being able to handle images by converting it into base 64, which is sort of an image to text kind of thing, so that it can be translated. It's interesting that it's a 12 billion parameter model, right? Most of the time that we see these really big multimodal models, they're first announced in those 70 billion or 400 billion and those kinds of things. So this is a relatively small model. What we haven't seen yet is what the kind of output it is and what kind of rankings it's going to have on the benchmarks. But I'm super excited for this, and in classic Mistral fashion, they simply released a magnet torrent link on their X page, on their Twitter page. That's it. They just made a post, and it's sort of a stealth release.
You're kidding. You can't. If you Google this 3 times, good luck finding this. Like, it's so new. I did finally find it by putting in the Pixtral name in there. That is the only reason I could Google it and even get it to pull up. And even this was posted 2 hours ago. So when you talk about like of the moment news, this is of the moment.
Breaking.
Yeah. Don't forget, they're in France and they're 6 hours ahead of us, or the East Coast, I should say. They're 6 hours ahead of me on the East Coast. So they're more like 4 p.m. in the afternoon or somewhere around there. But yeah, that is total Mistral fashion to Mistral fashion rather. Say Mistral. Actually, it's it. Which one's the company? Which one's the model? Which one's the whatever? I did finally find it though, so I just wanted to say that I found it on TechCrunch. God love TechCrunch. They're usually on top of this. And I think you said all this right. That it's the 12B, the 12 billion model, and it's 24 gigabytes in size. Very cool.
Yep. Yeah. So let's. So all of the tech heads have at it, break it apart, run over it. Let's see what comes out, because I'd love to see that their latest and greatest is on top marks for everything as well. That would be awesome. All right, let's move on to everyone's their most excited story, or they think is the most important story. Andy, let's start with you. What do you got?
Before I hit that more important story, let me, I don't know that that's more important. I just want to follow on the model release theme, because there's a new leader in the open source world that just supplanted the reputed new leader that was announced by Matt and that we've been discussing, which is the Reflection 70B model that apparently did not really perform as well as it had been advertised based on its benchmarks. So there's some issues with it. But on September 6th, a company called DeepSeek released DeepSeek v2.5, which is now the best model on the leaderboards. So, but I thought it was very interesting because that company, DeepSeek, is actually an AI spin-out of a Chinese quantitative hedge fund that was using AI to do their investment strategies as a hedge fund. But they've been doing so well with their AI development that they spun this out, and DeepSeek is now at the top of the leaderboards. So we've been having some discussions about the most advanced open source models, which you really can, if you're a tech head, go in and download and play with and fine tune and do whatever you want with. In fact, merge it with other models and so on. So the open source ecosystem of models is advancing very rapidly, and so DeepSeek V2.5 is the latest and greatest, and it just came out days ago. So it's all going forward. Okay, the thing I thought was most exciting is that there's an application of AI that's related to this concept of the wisdom of crowds. So when attempting to have a consensus estimate or prediction about really complex situations like global events emerging in the future, if you're trying to predict that, or you're doing politics, the best way to do that is to have multiple researchers collectively contribute their predictions, and then you basically average those predictions. Where is the consensus point around all of those predictions? And when you get a large number of people making those kinds of predictions, the aggregate prediction of them, offsetting errors at the high and low end of estimate ranges, zeroes in on something that's very, very close to what actually happens. So read about wisdom of crowds. It's a great concept. You need to understand it. It starts out, the book, it's a Malcolm Gladwell book that touches it. Anyway, the idea of wisdom of crowds came from Renaissance fair type, contest where you had to predict what the weight of an oxen was. Anyway, so it has some historical underpinnings. And the crowd can always predict very, very closely what the weight of the oxen is, but everybody in the crowd, unaveraged, is off. Okay, so too long, sorry, going off on tangents here. But there's a company that has developed an AI application using GPT-4o that does this kind of forecasting, generating probability estimates around any kind of question on topics around politics, global events, or almost anything. And the human forecasters aggregated have scored about 87% on these kinds of questions. And this wisdom and contained in GPT-4o developed 87.7% accuracy against the test set. So AI is capable of making very complex predictions about real world events. That's the important and interesting point here. And that's just one model. Now imagine if you take 100 models of different types and you apply them all to that, and then you average the results of those. Now you have a very super intelligent crowd of AIs, any one of which can beat the collective human predictors. And I think that's pretty exciting about the prospect of what accurate forecasting can be, and forecasting not just for financial reasons, but for what's really going to happen in the world.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that all falls in line to that whole strength of predictive analysis and things like that. So I like that there's this movement on it. Beth, what's your most exciting story? Oh, and first, sorry, Carl, welcome to the show today. Glad you could join us. Yeah, Beth, shoot. What do you got?
All right. So this story hits a little close to home for me, but is not. We've been talking about it behind the scenes. In fact, we had a conversation about it. Not this particular result, but the possibility of this after one of the shows this week. Klarna, in their sales and their earnings call, revealed that they are parting ways with Salesforce as their CRM. And they are also parting ways with Workday, which is another major enterprise SaaS that they engage with, because they have found that it's going to be better, easier, and more streamlined for them to use AI to build a product that meets their needs rather than trying to make their needs meet what the product is. So this is like fairly quiet news, but it was very much like, okay, I have actually been wondering about this, right? As people are like, oh, I can build a dupe of this app. I can build a dupe of this app. How much further will it go until it's pretty easy to build a customized solution for your personal data instead of trying to find all of the avenues by which your personal data can go in the prescribed doors that the SaaS you're using provides. And I know that actually long ago, Carl and Brian and I have all had those conversations of like, okay, how do we use these things? What is the chief of staff in the middle? I can just say, hey, you're going to get these things from all these people. And I find that really interesting, exciting, a little anxiety provoking, all of the above.
I find it interesting that it's Klarna, right, who's been in the news in the past because they were saying, "Oh, we're going to replace all these jobs with AI," right? That's what the newsflash.
I think they said we did.
Yeah. Oh, right, or the equivalent of, or something like that. Yeah. And so it seems like Klarna's definitely decided to make bold moves in that space. And I find it really interesting that they're willing to drop Salesforce, right, Beth? Haven't we talked about where Salesforce, one of the big things about Salesforce is once you're in the ecosystem, you're incentivized to stay within the ecosystem, right? So I'm with you. Quiet, but exciting stuff. This could be the clarion call of that big move to building your own solutions because AI makes it so easy to do so. That's awesome.
Right. Now, Klarna is not a small business, right? Like, Klarna has tons of resources to be able to do this. So this may be something that it takes a certain amount of resources in order to really engage and make work successfully for you. But I thought it's still worth saying.
There's two things I just want to comment on that. There's there's a lot of posters that are like this, unbelievable, could be more hype for them, but it's less about whether Klarna did it or not. It's more about, if you look at the landscape, connect the dots, things like Cursor and Replit, and as those things evolve and progress, then you go connect back to, hey, one person, $1 billion valued company, then connect the dots to the 5 levels of AI. You can start seeing like a trend line going slowly. And I've really been saying that there is an end story for SaaS, because if you can build, it may not be today, may not be next year, but if you can build the outcome that a SaaS tool provides you, personalized specifically to either your personal needs or the company's personal needs, because a SaaS tool, when it's licensed out, there's always that big dilemma of how much do we spend with said company, tailoring it for that company to the point where it's no longer what it's originally supposed to do. It's super customized. And how do you scale that to multiple companies? How often do you do that? And then the resources it takes to based on whether your client is a Nike or whether your client is a small client, obviously the resources for each one, and it's always a balancing act. But if a company can go out and build that by themselves, why do I need to license your software? That's right. The question, right? And
the story behind the scenes from that is that Salesforce is wonderful and it updates its software 3 times a year. And you know that if you are on the Salesforce team, that is potentially a 24-hour day for you, right? The day that it updates, all the back-end people who work with Salesforce are there until we make sure it didn't break any other system.
Yes.
that is attached to it, right? So like you update, and it's not like you get to choose to update. I don't know how many people use Salesforce in this. This is not a show about Salesforce, but Salesforce pushes the update. It's a SaaS, right? So it's in the cloud. So they push the update. You get lots of notice about when it's going to be updated and what the update is going to be, but you don't get a lot of notice about what your customizations are going to do with that, right? Yeah,
which is interesting. Just to build on, I don't know if the you all covered the hard pivot. That's what all the reporters were, all the articles about the hard pivot of Salesforce to AI agents. I don't know if there's a whole bunch of stories either last week on that. So it's fascinating. I don't know if Benioff actually is like, wait a minute, he can kind of sense where this is going and making that pivot now while he has a good business model and start spinning that another direction. Because if you connect all these dots together, I don't know what you all think, but I feel that it makes sense that why would we build software? We can kind of build the outcome ourselves. It's just, and yes, there's the data component and all that, but that's what APIs are for. So curious, it's an interesting story on that.
We'll keep following it. I have others, but I'm wondering.
I'm excited to hear about Brian and Carl's most exciting story for today. What do you guys got?
I'll pull it because Justin's saying the same thing. I didn't wear red because I wanted to talk about Strawberry again. God knows, I think OpenAI does this to me just so I have to talk about it every Wednesday. But this is what they're currently saying. This came out of the information. It's behind lock and key, and then other people pick up the information. I mean, the story, the information, the blog or the website or whatever it is. I don't really know much about it, but they put out their insider information as well. So Justin saying is Strawberry expected in the next 2 weeks with 20 seconds of processing, outputs and higher pricing. Also, ChatGPT is slow since yesterday. Could this be due to higher usage or higher volume updates? Okay, let me answer the second part first. Yes, I did notice that ChatGPT was struggling yesterday during the traditional Workday hours, at least on the East Coast. When I used it last night, it was like blazing fast. It was actually really, really good last night. Also yesterday, I had shared this with the team because Carl had brought up the thing about Strawberry, and I'll explain why it probably wasn't the same thing. But I just literally, I was coming into Slack to share with our team here that I gotten this answer out of ChatGPT, and I use ChatGPT quite literally all day long. And I saw this answer in the middle of another thread that just seemed like a higher order of reasoning to me. I mean, I read enough prompt results I feel pretty confident that I can, pick the ones that are a little different. And this one was definitely different. I didn't continue to see necessarily this higher order reasoning, but I was encouraged by it. And so that was probably just coincidence. It probably had nothing to do with Strawberry. And the reason I say that is they're saying, I mean, who knows what they're doing behind closed doors, but they're saying Strawberry, the information is saying, not OpenAI, is saying Strawberry will be separate from ChatGPT. It will not be in 4.0. And in fact, when you ask things against this model, it could take, like Justin was saying, 10, 15, 20 seconds to provide a response because it's supposed to do deeper level reasoning. And so it won't be integrated. We assume it will be at some point, just like DALL-E 2 was eventually integrated in DALL-E 3 and things like that, or Code Interpreter. All these things were brought in, and now they're just naturally part of ChatGPT experience, but they weren't initially. They were separate. So I think it sounds like this will be the same deal. I don't know about higher pricing. I'm imagining for Plus members, it probably won't be. There might just be limit caps like they typically do. You can only use it so many times every 3 hours, that kind of stuff. But I'm interested to see, because I can think of a lot of use cases where, being totally fine with waiting 20 extra seconds for higher order reasoning. There's just so much that I build and do inside the sales side of the world that there's just a lot of use cases. So I'm excited about it. I'm kind of surprised to hear that it's coming out. I had been saying, that I was assuming this would be before or after the U.S. presidential election. Doesn't appear that that's the case because we're still more than a month out from that. We're little less than 2 months out from that now. So who knows? We'll see. We'll see if that was even the right information or if it's more hype or otherwise. And honestly, that's not even really, I just want to make sure I brought that up because it did hit the news cycle yesterday. But actually, I wanted to share something totally different, if that's cool, Jyunmi. And this is something we talked about last week, but I wanted to kind of bring it in. And that's hyperbolic, because I've been able to use it a lot more over the last week. And I want to bring up something that, again, we talked about in the Slack channel. And I was sort of sharing this use case probably a couple of days ago when Reflection 70B came out. So hyperbolic, it comes from the same team that did Hyperwrite. This is a new model that they sort of dropped and then said, actually, this week or next week, they were going to have an even larger model that people could use. The creator, Matt, I don't remember Matt's last name, but Matt was talking about how there's some issues through the API. You can see on this screen, I'm using the demo side. So I'm literally just logged into their hyperbolic. And what you're seeing on the screen in purple here, I think is a really cool use case to it. So what this was I actually went to Claude and I said, hey, what's a great prompt to test prompting, to test the model? Because I didn't really have something that I could go to. And Claude came back with this, I think, really cool. In fact, I want to get more of these, but I just want to talk about what Reflection 7B is doing. So I don't want to take too much time here, but basically the gist of it is Claude came back and said, okay, look, imagine you're a scientist in the year 2150, tasked with terraforming Mars. Your mission has 3 interconnected parts. Then it goes on to talk about that. You've got to develop what you're going to do for the terraforming. You have to design a sustainable ecosystem. And then you need to write a short story. And there's some rules to this short story. It's got to be about 500 words, set 50 years after the transforming process begins. That's very specific. 50 years after the terraforming begins, which is some models trip up on that. It talks about how the story should be creative, use scientific terminology, so on and so forth. Okay, so then when you get into Reflection B, it has this thinking, which reminds me a little bit of Claude, but it also actually really reminds me of Baby AGI and, GPT, whatever it was, like a year.
God mode
from like a year plus ago, right? More than a year ago at this point. Where we're really sort of this first thought of like a computer looking like it's thinking and showing us the back end of it. I personally really appreciate this. I hope Strawberry looks like this, frankly, because I want to see that back end thinking. So we can see where Reflection 70B has broken down the problem. And it's like, let's work through each step together. And it's defined the four different steps, talking about consistency. Now let's work through each part together. We got to create a breathable atmosphere, right? We need greenhouse gases, so on and so forth. This process is going to take about 100 years. It breaks down. That was part of the requirements. And then so on and so forth. And then even here, it gives a short story, but it doesn't even stop there. Then it even goes into reflection mode after it was done with the prompt and immediately starts saying, okay, on reflection, I believe I've addressed all the parts of the questions comprehensively. The plan for creating breathable atmosphere is scientifically plausible. So it's even going back. You can see reflection. That's the end of its reflection. It's thinking, its output, and it basically comes back and gives a little bit of a refined output about everything that would need to happen. You can see here's the short story. They call it the Red Earth's Awakening. It talks about, it gives the name to a person, Arya, who's born on Mars. And it goes through this whole short story about Arya, conflicted with, is she a Earthling or is she a Martian, right? And, what does that mean? What does that mean if her parents were born on Earth and she was born on Earth? So, that's what the story sort of conflict about. Anyway, very, very cool to see. I'm really, really impressed with Reflection 7B with this model of thinking. Now, when I ran this last week, I ran it in Claude, I ran it in GPT-4o. And in my opinion, the story that came out of GPT-4o best clicked all the boxes, but you don't really get this level of thinking in there. So just for fun, I ran it through Llama's best model. It stopped sharing instead of keep sharing. 1 second. Llama's largest model. And you can kind of see that here. We're not going to spend time with it because it's really not about news. But you can see it's a different type of response. It gets right in sort of the short story in there. Still reflection. Sorry, guys. Share this tab instead. There's the Llama one. So it gets into the short story, but it does a little bit differently. Does not appear to have as deep thinking, reasoning, coming back to it, looking over it. And I've seen this many times with Reflection 70B, where it's doing this sort of like iterative approach to critical thinking. Personally, for me, as somebody who prompts all the time and does it for my professional job in sales and stuff like you guys do too, like this is encouraging to me. I want to see more models do this. It's nice to have the nice, neat everything together. And I get it with ChatGPT sometimes, like, hey, I don't need to see all the back end. Just give me the damn answer. That's true. That's mostly what a user wants. But it's nice for those of us who are looking at the types of responses and want to compare and contrast and think about how we can adjust our prompt. It's nice to have this. It's a little more like the playground. In fact, it was designed to look almost identical to the playground from OpenAI with your temperatures and your top Ps and stuff like that. So it's very, very similar. Anyway, sort of a news story because it was coming up. We don't know what Hyperbolic's coming out with, but if this is their 70B, what does their larger model look like and what can it do?
I do want to point out that I didn't follow this quite well, but whatever the controversy is, Matt Schumer yesterday apologized for something, and it was pretty big apology. And then a bunch of other people commented on that, on something. So I'm not sure what actually was going on. And I know there's a bunch of people who called him out pretty harsh on something, like really harsh, and like documented why this thing isn't even worth the time. So I don't know what's going on there, but it's interesting to hear that it works on the hyperbolic side. Like, I don't know if it's been full tested, but if you look at Matt Schumer, it didn't seem the past couple days of whatever that was. So internally, like they did the measures internally, right? Like you would do. I built a new model. I measured it against these things. This is the result I got. The API that they released was funky in some kind of way that those results were not repeatable. And he got called out. He said, it's working internally. We're trying to figure it out. And Brian, I think what you said the other day was that you were using it through Hyperbolic, which may in fact be internal, right? Because it's the same people.
Yeah, I do not get the impression I'm using the API. In fact, when you look at the screen, I'll just pull it right back up here. Again, you can see up in the corner here, demo and API. And I'm clearly on demo on here. So, and if you back off to the home screen, you can see, well, I expected that to show me all the models. Here's the models, I guess. Here we go. So you can see all the models that you can access from inside Hyperbolic, with 70B being theirs. And then I didn't mention it, but Flux was just added, I think, yesterday. So now you can actually create Flux images within Hyperbolic as well. So yeah, I mean, look, it's got to get fixed. You're going to put out a model, people are going to come at you. That's what they're supposed to do. So it's exactly how it should be. I love that there's people that are testing this stuff and calling people out, especially if it's not reaching the benchmarks that maybe a company said it was supposed to do. I'm not testing benchmarks here. I'm just looking at a certain prompt. I'm just telling you from somebody, this is just from somebody who has read 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 prompt results. I feel pretty confident that I can look at a prompt result and tell you whether I think it's quality or not. I think it's actually quality for the size of the model. And I think that's important. You got to look at the size of the model when you're looking at this. It's not nearly the size of Llama, right? And it's putting out really good results.
Sorry, Carl, we hijacked you.
What's your most exciting story for today, Carl?
It's actually, I have to bring this up because I feel this is a very pivotal point. So I'm sure you all, I don't know, some of you maybe, it was more of a entertainment factor for us in Canada, is your debates yesterday. What was very telling was, no, I don't think there was a question about AI. Not one. There was, all the normal stuff, which tells me that maybe AI isn't on usually the pretty high issues that you get talked about in the debate, all the stuff that, the candidates would talk about. I just have to say, though, instead of AI, guys talked about eating cats and dogs. Fantastic. The greatest line and quote that I think I've ever heard. But I think it was fascinating that they missed. If you could just ask one tiny question about what the potential administrations could do regarding it, because that has a big, big impact. Obviously, we believe so, on what's going to happen in the economy, people's jobs, all those kind of things, and to not get a candidate's perspective on what their administration will do. Kind of concerning, especially with the speed of how things are moving. And maybe you just got to wait for the Oprah special and see that.
It's true ABC did not ask a question, but Vice President Harris referenced AI in an answer about how America needs to lead. So it was actually addressed from that point, but it was not elaborated on because it was not a specific question about it. But yep, I agree, Carl.
Yeah, to me, it's a very, like, whatever. I don't know if there's another debate. I don't know, like, if they want to talk about it, or within the next how many weeks this will be talked about. But I'm thinking that there should be, I don't know, and I haven't read any of the policy documents that they come out with, but it's would be very, see where they're leaning towards in terms of regulation, how they want to see it. Because right now you pretty much are just leaving it up to the companies to decide where they want to go through their lobbyists.
Well, in that theme, I do have a story where a group of senators have gotten together and they're urging the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission to investigate how generative AI products could potentially have antitrust violations. And this really comes from the idea that AI platforms summarize and sometimes regurgitate specific content that is on websites, news sites, journalistic sources and things like that, and just present it as part of their results, but not necessarily leading it to that site for more information. We've seen in Perplexity that you have citation and sources and whatnot, and you can go to those pages if you're looking for additional information. But this might be more focused on the output that you get from like OpenAI or Anthropic or maybe even Google, where here's all the presented information, and you are less encouraged to go to those pages or those sites, and therefore not go through their normal monetization processes. And so they've brought out this call, and I think it was about a half a dozen senators who got together and is presenting this. So this is very new. We'll see what unfolds from that. What kind of discussion could come from it? If there's just more investigation, or will there be legislation that'll be the result of this? I'm not sure. And in a bit of other government news, the U.S. with a few other prime nations, such as China and Korea, are meeting in Seoul for a 2-day summit on potentially creating guidelines and outlines of how to use responsible AI in military action. So that should also be an interesting outcome to see what kind of conventions, or at least the initial discussion of them, will come out of that. Now, I do have a bunch of other stories, but I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk about their secondarily exciting story or anything else that they find important.
Yeah, since we were just talking about the debate, I will do my second story, which does reference AI. So after the debate, Taylor Swift endorsed Vice President Harris the Harris-Walz ticket. In her post, she said that because of the AI fake endorsements that were created that implied she was endorsing former President Trump, she felt it important to come out and say who she was endorsing, who she planned to vote for, and why. And I thought that was a really interesting, be careful when the door hits you on the way out, kind of reap the consequences, right? You did this, you put this out to imply one thing, and that actually potentially made the response a much bigger, much more forceful endorsement. against the message that you were trying to do with your deepfake AI thing. So I think we're going to see more of that moving forward. This was just a really big example, right? Extreme example because of what was happening last night and how many eyeballs were focused on it. So that's my second story.
Yeah, she signed a childless cat lady, which was at the JD Vance and what he had mentioned months ago, whatever. So look, it's obviously she's a huge voice. There's a lot of people who follow what she's talking about. So it's a big deal. Whether it would make any major difference to people who of voting age that can vote and also like Taylor Swift and follow her, I'm not sure. But I applaud her for, deciding to make a statement about it. I think she even said in her statement that when that AI thing came out, it really opened her eyes to the real potential of AI, which is kind of shocking considering she has been almost one of the main targets several times over. I mean, even going back to Kanye West videos where he had used AI and CG and things like that to, like, maybe not AI, but definitely CG to make it look like it was Taylor Swift in videos and stuff like that. So she's certainly been squarely in the bullseye of this. So if anybody is qualified to talk about the impact, it's certainly her. And she will not be the only one. We know that. So she's just the one that's the easiest target because she's at the top of her game. She's such a big international star and persona.
Yeah, the debate last night made me really want to see a competent AI assistant simultaneously fact-checking. That's a capability of AI that is related to what I led the show off with today, which is, hey, it can predict what's going on in the world. It can also, based on being connected to all of the available sources of information, immediately determine that there really isn't a cabal of 128 countries emptying their prisons and insane asylums and busing people into the United States of America. It could immediately fact check that, no, those countries, those 128 countries, their crime rates aren't going down while the United States crime rate is going up. Those are really, simple things to fact check. But we don't have a model in our current media, arrangement, even for something as important as a presidential debate, to really try to root things in the truth. And I believe that AI can support that. So now moving along, I thought a very interesting thing was that, in the discussion that we've had about the advancement of all the models towards AGI, there are two main layers of investment. One is on the compute side, like increasing the size of the models and, using much faster processors over, a very large number of parameters to get to advanced reasoning. And the other is that there are algorithmic improvements that are happening. And then there are other novel techniques like the idea of merging models in a way that doesn't require the huge compute investment. And so just this week at the All In event, All In is a group of billionaires in the technology world who have a podcast called the All In Podcast, and they host a big event every year. And Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, has returned. He'd basically been away on hiatus at Google, but now he's back and he says that he's working every day on AI. And what he said in this podcast, not the All In podcast, but at this event, and was reported, is that he doesn't believe that significantly increasing computational power is any longer necessary because improvements in algorithms and approaches are advancing faster than we can chase the chip-based compute power approach to increasing the development of models. So I thought that was very interesting in a perspective, obviously from someone who's deeply rooted, Google's at the forefront of AI. And so Sergey Brin has basically said, no need anymore to invest hugely in the compute infrastructure. Now, we might say, well, maybe that's Google just trying to, prevent his competition from investing further in buying chips and creating major AI training data centers. Who knows?
As you might have seen in the news, James Earl Jones passed away at 93 on Monday. And of course, he's not only a legendary actor, but his voice is legendary as being the voice of Darth Vader. So why this is an AI story is that actually back in 2022, he signed over his AI voice rights so that Darth Vader could continue to be his voice. And it's through a company called Respeecher. This is, again, back in 2022, so a while ago as in terms of AI and generative AI. And the Respeecher was in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus. That wasn't James Earl Jones. That's thought to be the last credited one. He's credited, but the last one he did live was the 2019 movie, whatever the last Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, was the last one that he actually did. But the Disney Plus one was his voice, but it was through this company called Respeecher, and it was an AI, apparently AI generated part of it. So interesting that happened so long ago. And it says, at least in this article that I'm reading from Forbes, that it was important to James Earl Jones that the character of Darth Vader continued on well past him, and that it had that, obviously generation defining voice behind it. Because what is Darth Vader with a mask where you can't see a mouth if it's not James Earl Jones? He is Darth Vader, right? So I thought that was really, really interesting. I'm curious to see how many more we'll see like this, whether it's some actor or actress or singer or entertainer towards the end of their professional career, aka maybe their life, maybe they know there's other things going on, where they do this and they sign over rights because they're so entwined with, pop culture and their voice for something, or their singing voice, whatever the case may be, that they might want to see that go on. And he signed it over to Lucasfilms. He didn't just sign it over to anybody. So I am sure he had full confidence that Lucasfilms was going to protect that voice. And I'm sure there was many other stipulations to it too. It wasn't like they could carte blanche use it in, the next Indiana Jones. I could be wrong about that, but more than likely there's some parameters on that as far as it being for Darth Vader. So just thought that was really, really cool. Thank you to James Earl Jones for doing that, so that we have many, many more years of listening to that iconic Darth Vader voice. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm in my 40s, and when I saw him come out on the screen in Obi-Wan, it still gave me the chills. So that's because of James Earl Jones. So I'm super excited to hear about this.
Yeah, a personal favorite of mine. I love all of his work. And Respeecher, interesting enough, seems to be Disney's go-to. They used it for all of the latest Star Wars movies. They used Respeecher. They also they worked with them for imaging, part of the imagery stuff as well, for like Princess Leia and Grand Moff Tarkin characters as well. So yeah, I agree, Brian. I think we're going to see a lot of that.
I know, and it's a Ukrainian tech startup.
Yeah.
So very cool. And it was Matthew Wood, apparently, who was a supervising sound editor at Lucasfilm, who originally brought Respeecher's work to Jones. I don't know if that was the first instance of them working together, or perhaps they were doing stuff before that. But yeah, very cool. That's good additional information. Okay, that's it for me.
Before we wrap up with Carl, I wanted to do 3 quick in the creative space, since you were talking about Respeecher and the illustrious Lord Vader. Audible is now creating a program to take in voice actors or audiobook narrator, record their voices, and add them to make AI, essentially AI performances or AI-based clones of them to be used in further audiobooks. But they're clear to say that they will also be compensated on a royalties basis when their voice is used. So I think that was a big debate point on how AI cloning could be used for voice actors and audio narrators specifically. Also, news from Adobe. They're saying, yes, our generative AI and generative video tools are coming, and they promise by the end of 2024. So that's only like 3 months. So let's see if they actually get it going. I'm excited about generative fill. Perhaps I never have to worry about jump cuts again if if generative fill can fill in those those short gaps. And then finally, a new company that started back in June called Verse is geared towards the Gen Z users to create mini sites that allows them to create to express themselves creatively through GIFs and stickers and text and animation and all of these fun things to create sort of a look into a personal site. So not the creators say not everybody wants to be on camera to make a TikTok, so Verse is available for them. Now, immediately after I was seeing some of the examples, it reminded me of MySpace. So what is old is new again, and I hope they do great. And that's pretty much all I've got for today. So Carl, lead us out for the day.
I think what I wanted to point out was there was a Penn joint article between the CIA director Bill Burns and UK Service Intelligence, Secret Intelligence Service, the SIS, Chief Richard Moore, where they said they are using AI, including generative AI, to enable and improve intelligence activities. They said we are training AI to protect and red team our own operations to ensure we can still stay secret when we need to. We're using cloud technologies so our brilliant data scientists can make the most of our data. And we're partnering with the most innovative companies in the US, UK, around the world. I can only imagine some of the big companies, like I think OpenAI said they were able to prevent Iranian something, combat that and shut down some of those sites. So I can only see that this is now pervaded into the spies around the world, and I can only imagine what other spy agencies, Mossad and whatever China's using, whatever Russia's using, that it's going to be more of AI warfare, I guess. So that was really interesting that they actually penned it as a joint kind of statement or opinion piece. So is it interesting to close up on? I just thought it was a very neat thing that to see these two pen that opinion piece.
Right, certainly. And there does seem to be some definite movement, or at least in the news, definite movement in the government circles about AI and, how that's all going to roll out. All right. I think that's where we're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I always love reading the chat during the show. And yes, I remember the Blair Witch Project as well. That was always a super fun experience. All right. That's all it for today. We have Google Labs coming up tomorrow. And on Friday, we're closing out by taking a look at Replit and their Agent AI. So if you aren't already part of the newsletter, go to our website, thedailyAIshow.com, sign up for that. You'll get lots of cool information in there, and that comes out every Sunday. All right, until tomorrow, see ya. Holla.